by knowing about your gut microbes, it's the best way of telling about your immune system. I can tell much more about someone's state of health and their likelihood of getting sick. We shouldn't think of the mind and the brain as separate from the body because it's all connected. And this is something that we've got to relearn in medicine.
What are the top 3 or 5 things you should never eat if you don't want to harm your microbiome? All right, you guys are in for a treat today. I have one of my heroes, Dr. Tim Spector, an epidemiologist, British epidemiologist, geneticist, known for his work on the gut microbiome, which has become very hot lately, and several books, a Zoe program he's going to tell us about. But I want to jump right in and ask you, Dr. Tim, what's the difference between British poop and American poop?
Well, they're both pretty shitty. But American poop is even shittier. It's even less healthy than British poop. And I reckon British poop is probably the least healthy in Europe.
How do you tell the difference between healthy poop and unhealthy poop?
Great question. It's not easy. And that's what we've been doing at Zoe, looking for the last year at 300,000 samples from both the US and the UK and trying to work out what is it about the microbes in there that classify someone's as healthy or unhealthy or average. And it turns out it's the ratio of good to bad bugs. So we've just had a paper come out in Nature showing this new scoring system. So rather than in the past, we used to say it's the diversity of the species you had in your gut that was important. We've now realized that was a bit too crude. It sort of worked, but it's the ratio of how many good bugs that are promoting health, promoting your immune system, you have compared to bad bugs that are associated with poor diets and poor health outcomes that are promoting inflammation and irritation and nasty signals on metabolism. That's the ratio. And it turns out, if you look at the average US one, it's way worse. It's like 30, 40% worse than the average British one. And this was a bit of a shock when we first saw it. We've never seen such big differences before.
Do you want your poop to sink or float? These are very intellectual questions.
I'm very ambivalent, actually.
Is one a sign better than the other?
If it floats too much, it probably means, you got all kinds of fats in it and things like this. So, but they should be nice and soft. They should be relatively smooth. They shouldn't be like rabbit droppings, but they shouldn't, be like a cow pat either. So it's more the shape of them, I think. And it's all about, having regular, so it should be at least once a day. Just once a week doesn't cut it. Although many people, when we did a survey in the UK, thought that was very normal and very healthy. That's a sign that people are very deficient in fiber. So you can do a test like a gut microbiome test like Zoe's if you want to really find out how healthy you are compared to other people. But people often ask me, if you can't afford a test, what signs are there? And it's often the health is the absence of problems. And if the problems that are related to having a poor gut test would be you're constipated, you've got diarrhea, it alternates quite a lot, it's not very regular, you get bloating after meals, you might also get heartburn. And all these are signs that your gut is not healthy. Also, if you suffer from multiple allergies, food allergies, other immune problems or other diseases, that will also make it much more likely you've got an unhealthy gut. So they're the sort of very broad picture. But it is quite tough to tell how you are compared to other people without this new technology. That's why, really, I think it's in the future, people will be testing their poop regularly like you have a blood pressure checkup. It may not be specific to particular diseases, but it's the most holistic view of how your body is responding to the environment and the signals it's putting out to your immune system, your nervous system, your metabolism. And so there's very little else that we can test that's like a single measure of your overall health and resilience. It's much better
than a blood test?
It's better than any blood test I know.
Wow.
And it's better than any DNA test. And I was doing genetics for 20 years. So I can tell much more about someone's state of health and their likelihood of getting sick. I can't be very specific about it, but generally, by knowing about your gut microbes, it's the best way of telling about your immune system at the moment because we don't have good blood markers for things like the immune system.
So what kinds of things would a stool test reveal in a hurry that might surprise people?
It would tell you that you've got lots of inflammatory microbes in there and very few good ones.
So that might be reflective of system-wide or body-wide inflammation.
Yeah, so that works two ways. So your microbes are often responding to your body. And so if you have an inflammatory disease, then the microbes will sense that and you get more pro-inflammatory microbes who like that environment. So it's chicken and egg, and the microbes themselves can create the environment. So the bad ones like to live in an inflamed scenario which puts off good microbes living there. And when you change that environment, that changes everything else. So if you're having say a junk food diet, then that is pro-inflammatory. The microbes are just increasing that inflammation in the gut and making it very hard for any good microbes to live there.
Oh, interesting. So isn't it essentially types of bacteria that thrive are the ones we feed with our food?
Yes, exactly. And so now, as well as this overall test, what we call the Zoe score, we've also got a subsets where we've got 4 clusters of health. So we know the microbes that are particularly associated with your immune system, with your metabolism, with your way you get rid of fat, and your glucose. You can now subscore those to see how you're doing, which allows people when they're changing their diet or they're exercising or they're doing something better or worse for the health to track those over time. So you can focus on those sort of problems. This is where the microbiome is really good, and I think it's going to be really useful for testing, particularly interventions like probiotics and prebiotics or changes in diet, things that we've not been very good at doing before.
I am a big fan of Zoe, a company that you co-founded. The top executives are real scientists. You guys have funded tens of millions of dollars worth of real scientific research. I've heard of perhaps a paper in Nature coming out, but then it really created mostly diagnostic products to date that help us use what I believe is the most important organ in our body, our microbiome, which weighs 6 to 8 pounds in some cases, to really be a leading indicator for our health. And I know you have a new supplement product coming out that helps feed our microbiome. But before we get deeper into Zoe, what do we want to feed our microbiome to make the healthy bacteria thrive? What do we want to be putting in our stomach so our guts are healthy?
It's all about promoting the good guys and squeezing out the bad guys. So to promote the good guys, you feed a wide variety of healthy foods that will allow those guys to replicate faster than the bad guys. And basically they get squeezed out and the bad guys have got nothing to eat. At the moment, the bad guys, are eating the junk food, the burgers, the fats,
and this is a completely different species of bacteria, but that lives in your gut.
Yes. So we've all got some of them. Essentially, if you have a gut-friendly diet, it will encourage the good guys to replicate, multiply, have sex, have fun, have an abundant feast every night. And the poor, the guys who previously were on the junk food diet, they've got nothing to eat, they'll shrivel away and go. So that's what you're trying to do sort of mentally in your head. So that's why what we want to do at Zoe is, and what I do in my books is to try and get people to think about food in a different way. It's very easy to have all these food rules, very confusing. Everyone's got, you must exclude this, you must do this, you must do that. It actually gets very easy if you think from the point of view of your good microbes, what do they want to eat? And then it becomes actually quite easy. So one is to eat 30 different plants a week. Okay, diversity of plants, because your microbes are fussy. They're not all going to be happy with spinach or beans, because some of them will be specialized to only have one particular type of food or even a subset of that food. So the wider that is, the greater the good guys you can promote.
So we're talking about lots of species of bacteria, each of which favor a slightly different food or
exactly.
fiber.
And a real eye-opener for me was when we did a study about a year ago and discovered that the strongest association of any one microbe with any one food was with coffee. And it's one bacteria called Lawsonobacter that only eats coffee.
Really?
It is so fussy. Only it doesn't like
There's
tea.
There's a coffee bacteria.
Doesn't like tea, doesn't like matcha, it doesn't like chocolate. It's only coffee. So we see it in 10 times the level of coffee drinkers than non-coffee drinkers. It's in most of us because we're surrounded, even if you don't like coffee, you're surrounded by coffee drinkers. And so they'll be breathing those microbes around in the air and everywhere. You're surrounded by microbes. So you got a little bit of it, but they're just waiting for you to actually have some coffee to expand and replicate. So that gives you a mental picture of how specialized our gut microbes are when they're waiting for the food to come in. So that's why it's so important to grasp this concept of diversity, of adding more to your plate. And people get worried when I say 30 plants, and anyone listening says, oh gosh, I can't do 30 plants. Well, it's a nut, it's a seed, it's an herb, it's a spice.
And coffee counts too.
And coffee is a plant, it's a health food. And people forget.
Did you hear that? Coffee is a health food. That's right.
People have got it all turned around, right? So we think of orange juice, and we're in Florida, the land of orange juice, right?
Yeah.
That is absolutely a non-health drink, right? This should be with the sodas and everything else because of it's just sugar, basically. But coffee is a fermented bean. It's got no sugar in it. It's really healthy, has all these polyphenols, and it's got fiber in it. That's just an example of why my number one rule is this 30 plants a week for everybody.
And I think you've kind of made that famous, put it in our brains, and it's certainly something I advocate.
Yeah, and it resonates with the public, and certainly it's very big in the UK now, and that's why in the Zoe app, we've got a feature now that allows you to keep account of your plants. That's the thing I really use about the app more than anything, is just checking by the end of the week, and I checked it earlier, and I'm at 33 plants, so I've done pretty well this week.
By the way, I downloaded the Zoe app last night, and you can take a picture of your meal, and it knows what you're about to eat, and it can keep track. It's such an easy assistant, I guess, to help us.
Yeah, well, I think that's what we need. We need these tools to make the right choices when we're faced with, big food and all this
and the bamboozling
misinformation.
marketing. And
the fact you can't read a packet in a store and really know what's in it.
By the way, the Zoe app is free. So for now, hurry up and download it before things change. But just to help people understand, I think the microbiome is so misunderstood, and you're better than anybody else at understanding how it works. I want to talk about the good bacteria, the good bugs, and the bad bugs. But first, the good bugs. We have a variety of good bugs, hundreds of species probably, and they most of them like their own type of food. But what happens when we feed our microbiome, these good bugs, when we feed them fiber-rich, diversity of fiber-rich food? What do they do that helps create health?
So most of the microbes are in the lower part of the intestine. So you have to have fiber that isn't easily digested. It's one of the definitions of fiber is it's a form of carbohydrate that's really hard to digest so that it doesn't get absorbed in the upper part of the intestine, the small intestine, and go straight into the bloodstream. Like if you have white rice or white bread or sugar, it just goes straight into the system. So your microbes don't get it. So it's foods that have some fiber in it. They then go down to the large intestine where the microbes will break the fiber down into smaller particles and its intrinsic parts, and they break it down into multiple things like they'll separate the polyphenols from it, which are these antioxidant chemicals that then provide them with energy source. So they sort of suck out defense chemicals of plants and they use it for themselves. And the other thing they do is certain ones of them produce things like short-chain fatty acids, they're called, SCFAs. These fatty acids are little short messenger things that actually go into our gut lining and help our immune system. So they're the messengers sending really positive health signals to our body through the immune cells. And that dampens down things like inflammation and just tells the whole body to calm down. So you've got these energy source and a source of saying, I'm going to regulate the immune system absolutely correctly for my environment.
How does a short-chain fatty acid regulate the immune system? How does it know when to ramp up if I'm sick or back off if there's sort of an autoimmune thing going on?
You've got immune cells that are on the lining of the gut. And they have these receptors there, and there's various mechanisms of how these receptors work, but the short-chain fatty acids are basically there to dampen it down. And if they're not being produced, then the immune system will get agitated, get overstimulated, and that's what we think is the cause of low-level inflammation in many populations. It's why we get food allergies. It's just inappropriate response to our environment. So in a way, all these immune cells are waiting for the microbes to give them signals about what's happening in the outside world. So we've got to think of it that way.
Almost like a brain, isn't it?
It is like a brain.
So much more complicated than we thought.
Well, the second brain of us is in our gut. So if you joined up all the nerve endings in the gut, it's the same size as a cat's brain. Wow. So just what's happening in our immune system, you're also getting chemicals that are being broken down from our foods and our microbes that are telling the nervous system what to do. And those signals, again, go through the vagus to the brain, the big nerve that connects the two, and they tell the brain what's going on. And this is why we have this sort of gut-brain axis, as it's called, and why we shouldn't think of the mind and the brain as separate from the body, because it's all one system. It's all connected. And this is something that we've got to relearn in medicine, because we've gone too far down this route. Is absolutely all connected. And so we're looking now at a lot of gut interventions. Whenever we do a study, say one of these Zoe citizen science studies, which have hundreds of thousands of people, whether it's fasting, whether it's adding fermented foods, whether it's taking the daily 30 prebiotic, the first things people notice is their mood and their energy change. Mood, energy, and hunger, they're the first things that change.
You know, I've spent my life exploring the world, not chasing adrenaline, but meaning. From the blue zones of Costa Rica to the highlands of Sardinia, I've learned that adventure isn't about going further, it's about going deeper. That's why the Defender caught my attention. It's not just built for the toughest roads, it's designed for people with a purpose, a vehicle capable of great things like the people who drive it. When I'm planning a new expedition or just heading up to my lake place, I want something that feels as durable and capable as the journeys themselves. The Defender, whether the 2-door 90, the 110, or the 8-seat 130, gives you the confidence to explore wherever your path leads. Because adventure isn't just about conquering the landscape, it's about connecting with it. Explore the Defender at LandRoverUSA.com. In the blue zones, movement is natural and learning is lifelong. I found that listening on Audible is one of the easiest ways to build simple habits that support long-term well-being without having to sit still. It's time to take care of you, and you can do that with the top voices in well-being on Audible. You can level up your career, your sleep, your mindset, your longevity. You can even listen to my titles, like my book, The Blue Zones of Happiness, while you're out for a walk. It's about making these big ideas fit into real life. From the actionable steps in Born to Walk by Mark Sisson to the poetry and reflections in I Am Maria from Maria Shriver, there is something for everyone. Kickstart your well-being journey with your first audiobook free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/livebetter. Membership is $14.95 a month after 30 days. Cancel anytime, because staying curious might just be one of the best longevity practices we have. Yeah, you're a great writer. You've written The Diet Myth, Spoon Fed, and now we have this new book, Ferment. I'm one of the first to receive it here. Maybe it's a metaphor, but maybe it's actual, but you assert that the microbiome actually manufactures vitamins. How does that work?
Well, we have 200 times more genes in our microbes than we do in our bodies. And genes are basically programming units for proteins. So through evolution, we've evolved a system to have all these other bugs inside us that are doing the job that we can't do. So they produce all kinds of vitamins, from most of the B vitamins, including B12 actually.
Wow.
Vitamin K and many other ones, as well as neurotransmitter chemicals like serotonin and GABA. They're really essential for our health, plus many thousands we don't yet understand. So, You've got to think of the microbiome not as just these creatures that are running around attacking each other, but as chemical factories. So each of them is designed to eat a certain food and produce a certain series of chemicals. And we use these chemicals in our body to manipulate our immune system and our nervous system and tell us exactly how our metabolism should be working. So this is why the more chemicals you've got in your system, i.e. the healthier your gut, the more you can be flexible and more you can deal with problems and illness and aging, etc. So this is why gut health, in my view, is now absolutely central to our health. And that's what Chinese traditional medicine has been saying for thousands of years. They didn't know about microbes, but they knew that there was something here that was driving
so magical.
us. You've got to think, we house and feed these microbes, give them a nice place, a safe place, and in return, they offer us these chemicals, these vitamins, to keep us functioning normally. And this is an evolutionary marriage, really. It's just common convenience. It works very well. We can't live without microbes.
The good guys, they're eating at least 30 types of plants, mostly fiber. And if you feed them, they love it, and they reward us with these manufactured vitamins, these short-chain fatty acids, a better immune system, less inflammation, the hormones that help us feel good. Now, over on the other side, what happens if we feed the unhealthy bacteria, the meaty, cheesy, ultra-processed, sugary foods? What happens then?
Well, you suddenly get like fat-loving and meat-loving bacteria that will still break down those products into other ones. But generally, the byproducts are inflammatory messengers, chemicals that sort of irritate the immune system. So they have the sort of opposite effect. And it's a whole cocktail that is really bad. And in addition to just eating, say, lots of meat and cheese, you're eating a lot of chemicals. And these additives in these processed foods have a particular effect on the gut microbes as well. So if you look at the back of packets, you'll see things like emulsifiers, preservatives, sugar alcohols, gums and glues, and colorants and flavorings. And we know that many of these have been shown in studies in humans to cause abnormalities in the microbiome as well. So they make them stick together, for example, these emulsifiers that stick food together. Evolution hasn't given, these aren't natural things, apart from a very few. And so them and the artificial sweeteners have a negative effect on the microbes, making them react in funny ways and producing strange chemicals. So they've found that if you have a lot of artificial sweeteners, which many people think are safe, your microbes will respond by producing chemicals that are more likely to put your insulin and glucose levels up and tip you towards type 2 diabetes. So,
really, even though you're not drinking sugar?
That's right. And this is why none of these foods are ever tested for the gut microbiome. They're tested, does it give rats cancer? That's or some very basic test. But no foods are ever tested for its effect on the gut microbiome. And you can talk also about pesticides and herbicides that might be okay for humans, but actually they mess up your gut microbes as well. So lots of things can affect our gut microbes that are perhaps more sensitive, particularly to modern things that they haven't evolved to deal with.
So what are the top 3 or 5 things you should never eat if you don't want to harm your microbiome?
I never say never. And, I'm someone that will, occasionally stray, because I don't think eating these things once a month is really going to hurt you. It's when you're eating it multiple times a day.
That's a very good point.
So we mustn't get so phobic about this stuff, right? Otherwise, we would have seen massive levels of cancer and heart disease, very clearly. So they have subtle accumulating effects. And if you've got a good gut microbiome, you can have this stuff occasionally, I think. And when you're traveling and living in the real world, it's best to not be too obsessional. But things to avoid eating on a regular basis are what we call high-risk processed foods. And another part of the Free Zoe app is that we've got a new ultra-processed risk score that looks at foods and allows you to scan them, and we've got them into 4 categories of 0, mild, medium, and high risk, depending on what the food companies have done to that food to make it bad for you. And the worst ones have all of these categories. They have additives that we know are risky and have been shown to cause problems in humans, like some of the ones I've listed, but others might be carcinogens. Then you've got the second category is hyperpalatability. They are
super delicious.
Make you overeat because they have a blend of sugar, salts, and fats that hit that bliss point.
Yeah, Doritos are often cited as the bliss
they're perfect.
point.
Yeah, they're the perfect example. And the third thing is also that affects your gut microbes is the energy density and the speed at which you eat that food. It disintegrates in your mouth, right? So you don't need to chew it. There's no fiber in it. And you're essentially, on the one hand, starving your microbes because there's no fiber, and then you're hitting them with all these chemicals that are coming down at it.
So Skittles or something.
Yes, it's a sort of double whammy when you're doing that. So they're the sort of foods to avoid, the ones that have all those components in it, the really high-risk ones. And that's about 25% of all foods.
You know, with the Dan Buettner Podcast, we like to be as specific and actionable as possible. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being really bad for your gut, 10 being really great for your gut.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to rate we'll just do it kind of quick.
Some of your favorites.
Yeah, so, okay. Black beans.
They would be...
1 to 10. You just be
10
quick.
is good, 10.
10. Quinoa.
That would be 9.
Cornflakes.
They would be 2.
Jelly beans.
1.
Soy milk.
5.
Doritos.
Doritos would be 1.
A ribeye steak.
Yeah, I'd say about 4.
A bowl of spaghetti.
5.
White rice.
2.
Brown rice.
3.
How about like Dannon yogurt, which has a bunch of fruit and sugar in there?
But there's some fermented food in it, so I would score that. If it's a flavored one, I'd score it about a 5, I guess.
5. And how about just plain yogurt, Greek yogurt?
That's as good as it gets.
A 10.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you go through a lot of this in your new book, Ferment. But let's talk about fermented foods. And I mean, it's sort of a marketing thing. Whenever I see active cultures and so forth, I kind of have to dismiss it. But you assert that fermented foods are probably more important than we realize. Yeah,
much more important, particularly in the English-speaking world where we've given up fermented foods, whereas the rest of the world hasn't. And they're seen as alien and strange to us. And, nobody knows how to make them. And you have to go to strange stores to buy them, and they have funny names. And it's very strange because you go to other countries, you go to Scandinavia, you go to Central Eastern Europe, you go to the Mediterranean, you go to India, you go to Africa, you go to Asia, to Korea.
What are
surrounded by them.
What are some of these fermented foods you find in other countries?
Well, kimchi, for example.
Yeah, from Korea.
From Korea, which they have 3 times a day, and, they feed babies. And we'd say, that's a bit strange for us, but, it's normal for them.
It's sort of a fermented cabbage, right?
It's like fermented cabbage. Sauerkraut is a basic fermented cabbage, very simple to make. You just cut up some cabbage and you add 2% salt and you stick it in a jar. I mean, you can't get much easier than that, right? And kimchi is a little bit like that. You start like that and you just add a paste with spices and ginger, spring onions, etc. That's super healthy for you. And the Japanese use miso, so they basically take a soybean, which is pretty inedible in its hard state, and by fermenting it, they create this incredible series of other foods that is their staple. They ferment it with a fungus called koji, and you make miso sauce, you've got soy sauce, you've got miso paste, which is basically, I now use that all the time as a stock cube.
Oh, interesting.
It's amazing umami flavors.
Yeah.
And it is really rich in everything. You get tempeh, which is a soybean. It's a bit like a tofu. That's fermented. And you've got natto, which is an amazing ferment that's really high in spermidine, things that are really good for aging. So all these cultures, and I could go around the world and name all these other ones. Most countries have fermented milk. kefir or kefir is like super yogurt. And of course, yogurt is a fermented food. Obviously, when it's done by the big companies and they give it to children, it's not healthy at all because they add so much sugar or artificial sweeteners that drowns any poor microbes in there. And then don't forget cheese, but it's got to be real cheese. And in the book, I did this study of 70 products that you can get in stores in the UK. And we tested them all in our microbiome lab and got some interesting results. So we were talking about cheese. We took a Kraft slice, the most common cheese in America. And I've got one on my shelf that I've kept out of the fridge for 5 years. It still looks nice and shiny. And we couldn't get any microbes from that one at all. No microbes would go near it, right? It's like too toxic for microbes. So that's most of artificial cheese in America is like that. So the stuff you put on pizza, the analog stuff, fake mozzarella.
But a good Parmesan's probably okay.
Yes, but there's one category of cheese, but there's another one like even Philadelphia cream cheese, which that can't be real. It is real. It's got real microbes in it. If you leave it in the fridge long enough, it will go moldy, right? Whereas the other stuff never goes moldy because it's not really live. Then got all the other cheeses, the cheddars, the others, they've all got microbes in it if they're made properly. So you've got this big range. Then you've got the water kefirs, Tibicos, which isn't well known yet, but a lot of used in Mexico. And kombucha is well known in the US, many parts anyway. The canned ones where we saw no live microbes to the ones where you see a sediment in it with 50 or so microbes in it. So some really the good, the bad, and the ugly in all these products. But I was actually pleasantly surprised that most of the commercial ones you could see, apart from things in cans, had a good lot of microbes in them.
What would be 3 really good sources if a mom says, I want to get more fermented foods in my family's diet? What's a kind of a simple 2 or 3 or 4 simple products in a grocery store?
Well, the simplest is full-fat Greek yogurt.
Okay.
If you've got nothing else in it, it's going to have microbes in it, and everyone can get that at any store. And so that's thing to have daily. If you want to boost it with microbes, you might add a bit of milk kefir to it. You can do 50-50 if you find it too sour. If you're vegan, you might want to use a coconut kefir.
Okay.
They are increasingly being seen, and they have lots of live microbes. So you might think coconut sounds a bit fishy, but actually it does work, and you can get real microbes out of that. Then it's things like either sauerkraut or a kimchi. Start adding that to your food, your salads, or into your soups. In my cookbook, I've got lots of ideas of how you can...
The Zoe cookbook, by the way.
The Zoe cookbook, which is
available.
Which you
can get here in the United States.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend it.
So there's lots of recipes there where you can see how I've added lots of ferments to it. So that you have a curry or something, and at the end, instead of putting cream in, you put milk kefir around it, adding miso to lots of things. But yeah, even in salads, you can add bits of sauerkraut, and I always have a little bit of either sauerkraut or beet kraut is another one, goes really well with cheese. So it's very easy to get 3 or 5 portions a day. You don't need a lot. It's small and often is the key to that. And the studies support this, that if you can get 3 to 5 portions a day, you're going to get a real reduction in your blood markers of inflammation. And we've done a big study of 6,000 people to show that people who weren't used to, the average American isn't used to having ferments, just like in the UK. We gave them 3 a day, and they had to do that for 2 weeks. Half of them noticed big improvements in mood, energy, and hunger. And they had reduced bloating, because a lot of people suffer from irritable bowel syndrome. They think, I can't have these foods, but actually it made them better.
Just to be clear on miso, which I think is a brilliant idea, using it as a bouillon or adding kimchi. Can you cook these foods, or does that kill the bacteria?
Great question. If you heat them up above, all bugs are dead above 65 degrees centigrade.
150 so or
150 degrees Fahrenheit,
more or less.
So you can put it into warm food, and it will stay alive, at the end. But if you're cooking with it, it will kill the microbes. Now, until recently, I would say that was a terrible idea. You got no benefit from it at all. But in researching this book, I found out there is this whole new type of microbial benefit. So you've heard of probiotics, which are live microbes that give a health benefit. You've got prebiotics, which are like fertilizers for your gut microbiome. And now you've got this new category called postbiotics, which are dead microbes. So some people call them zombiebiotics. And I used to think this is a crazy notion, just by marketing companies or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've seen really bona fide studies, at least a dozen studies, showing that compared to dummy ones, these dead microbes, whether pasteurized or heat killed in some way, have a benefit. And this is both in some probiotic capsule studies, but also in some fermented studies where they've got a milk kefir and they've actually pasteurized it. It still has benefits on.
But not as much as the...
Well, in some cases it does, but in others it doesn't.
Okay.
In general, I would say they have less effect than the live ones. So you should always have the live one, because when you're having a live one, you're getting both dead and alive microbes, right? Because they don't live forever. They have a pretty speedy life. So, we're often talking about longevity, right?
Yeah.
I want to live to be 100. Well, these guys, they get born, they grow, they have sex, and they die, and that's all in an hour. Right?
That's a good hour, though.
They pack it in, right? And so our body is full of dead microbes. Someone went to the trouble of actually working out how much of our stool was full of dead microbes, and it's about half. So we're all constantly getting these, but if they can reach the right part of the small intestine, we think that these dead microbes are tickling the immune cells, even though they're dead, because the cell wall has these little protein sticks that's sticking out of it. And as they go through, they're just tickling the immune cells and acting a bit like a vaccine. And you think, vaccines, they're often dead,
that's right,
killed microbes.
Yeah.
So suddenly this whole idea makes sense. So even the worst products in the stores that you find here in the US, like some of these kombuchas in cans, they're going to have some benefit in them. They will have some of these, either the microbial cell wall, or they'll have the soup of the microbes.
By the way, if you don't have a lot of money, go to Tim's Instagram feed, because Tim is one of the top scientists in the world, top 1% cited scientist in the world. Yet he's also a tinkerer in the kitchen, and you make a lot of your own probiotics, don't you? You make your own fermented foods.
Well, I had to for the book. I can't be an expert and not know about it at all. So I did a lot of experiments. They didn't all work.
Yeah.
But that's part of the fun. If anyone does fermenting, it's this trial and error. There's no two recipes are the same. Everyone's home is different. Everyone's temperature is different. The starter culture is different. But it really is great fun. And everyone can be a fermenter. I tell people the easiest possible recipe is to get 10 heads of garlic and a jar of raw honey. So good honey should be unpasteurized if you can get it locally, because that means it's got bugs in it. And all you do is you peel the garlic, you put it in the honey, and you wait a week. After a couple of days,
refrigerated or
no, room temperature. Okay. Microbes like room temperature. They're
top or no top.
But put a top on it.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter too much because this is under liquid.
Okay.
Other things you want to keep the air out. But like a screw cap jar is fine. And then you'll just see little bubbles coming up. And what's happening is that, and you say, that's strange, where did the bugs come from? And it turns out there are bugs everywhere. So even in the garlic, even if you got it from the nice store, it looks clean, there's still bugs in it, just like there are in the cabbage. And they'll come out and start eating the honey and multiplying and having a wild time, as we were discussing, right? And that breaks down the honey, and then you get those microbes then start breaking down the garlic, and it softens it up, and it makes after a week, you've got a really tasty snack.
Are we just plucking out the garlic cloves and eating those? Or
yeah, you can do that, or you can put it in a blender and add it to your salad dressing.
Okay.
So I just always keep a little pot of this, and it's a perfect thing to add to salad dressing. Just gives it
brilliant,
a really nice
two ingredient,
and it's super healthy. So that's the easiest one.
Remember Tim Spector Instagram. You can see him doing these things, You described our microbiome as being this kind of ongoing conflict between bad bacteria and good bacteria. What happens now when we introduce fermented foods? Because those are live bugs often. Are we trying to coax the growth of another type of organism in our gut, or is it just purely some sort of a byproduct?
Well, we used to think that these fermented or probiotics used to work by colonizing the gut and trying to get in there and take over and sort of elbow their way in and do something. But the recent science is suggesting that's not how they work at all. The bugs that like food rarely live in our guts. So the overlap, there's only about 4% of bugs in our gut that can live in food. Most of them are very specialized. So when you're eating something that is grown in food, they love milk, for example. When you eat them, they're going to be hanging on to the milk. And when they get into your stomach, they've got nothing really to eat. So they will pass straight through. They take a long time to get there. It might hang around a little bit, but they're not going to stay there and say, oh, this is a nice new home. I'll just adapt and eat something different. No, they're highly specialized. So they don't do that. What we think they work in the same way is they probably act on the small intestine where there's less competition. So this upper part of the gut, less competing bugs, and so they can have an impact there. We think they, again, somehow influence the immune system, telling the body, these are good guys, sending a good message down. But they're not directly competing because they'd be outnumbered. It's about, one fan going to the Super Bowl and you're trying to sort of, convince everyone else there to buy you a drink, it's not going to happen. So rather than thinking that it's all about colonizing your bug with these foods, it's about seeing them as little messengers that every day are coming down, sending the right signals. And this is why, in things like the Mediterranean diet, you see this regularity of these foods that seems to have this impact. It's not just having one feast once every 2 weeks or so. It's this regularity, having the cheese, having the milk. These things are all part of that culture that at some part in the day you're going to have that.
It's so deliciously complex.
It is, and the science is evolving all the time. I would have written a very different book just 3 years ago. I would have written off all these dead bugs and given a very different story, but it's now getting much clearer exactly what's going on. In 5 years, it'll be different again. That makes it so much fun for a scientist.
Yeah, and you have a front seat to all of this.
Absolutely.
It's so nice, by the way, that Zoe's a company. I think you've spent something like $10 million, you and your investors, on doing this research. So you're not just doing your interpretation of science and then trying to create some product. The company is evolving along with the science. And I know you've just come out with this new, I'm not a fan of supplements, but I am a fan of your supplement, this Zoe 30. Why should we think about taking a Zoe 30 and what's in it?
The Zoe Daily 30.
Daily 30, I'm sorry.
Is a whole food supplement. So it's a whole new category. Okay. So you think of supplements as some chemicals or green powder or something else. This is dried plants. So we've now got about 34 freeze-dried plants in small pieces, a bit like a granola mix, but each of them is an individual plant. And that's what we wanted to do. And it includes, and of course, we have, 7 fungi, which aren't plants technically.
Yeah, mushrooms.
Because actually some of them are functional mushrooms like cordyceps. We can't call it a food, we had to call it a supplement. So that, in a way, we didn't know that at the time, but that's why it's called a whole food supplement. And I think it is a new category. And the idea is that we knew that this 30-a-week message was important for people, but many people struggled to get there. And they said, is there something else I can do to get me on that way or get me there quicker or help me when I'm too busy or when I'm traveling? It can be really hard to get your different vegetables and herbs and spices. So this is something you can add every day to your meals. It's not meant to replace meals. You top it up. So idea is mainly breakfast where you're in control of your meal, whether you're having oats, you're having some scrambled eggs, you're having a yogurt, you're having a smoothie. Put it on there, or at lunch you might have.
It's just a few tablespoons, right?
It's 1 tablespoon, 1 scoop,
yeah,
and that gives you 5 grams of fiber, just in 1 scoop. which we all know that's that extra 5 grams itself, we know from epidemiology, it's going to reduce your chance of dying early by about 8%.
Jesus, just 1 tablespoon. Wow. So does that mean
it's a regular habit that's important.
If I put 10 tablespoons on, does it lower my chance of dying by 80%?
It's possible because the epidemiology for fiber hasn't shown an upper limit yet.
Is that right?
The average American has about 15 grams of fiber.
A day.
And the recommended limits in most countries are around 30. And if you look at populations like in Africa, they're having 60 to 80, and they're very healthy. So it could be that the real amounts of fiber, just keeps going up. There isn't actually a limit. So I think if we can find ways of getting fiber into people that doesn't cause problems, doesn't have any side effects, then this is the sort of way to go through giving people natural plants. And there's things like, as one of these 7, fungi, which is hard to get. I don't know about you, but it's pretty hard to be eating mushrooms every day of 7 varieties. We've got things like baobab in there. We've got, lots of different berries. We've got some Mediterranean herbs in there, all a mix. So it's, I think, a new way of looking at it. And we've just added in, because of my research, we've just added in freeze-dried kombucha, because we think that that's likely to have a health benefit.
Postbiotics there.
So we are the first product like this that has a postbiotic as well.
And what I love about it, there's probably no downside. This isn't a processed...
Well, at Zoe, we always test everything properly. So we do a randomized controlled trial, huge by nutritional standards, 350 people divided into 3 groups. And the group taking the daily 30, on average, people improved by about 14 good bugs improved, compared to 0 in the control group and 3 in the probiotic group. We know probiotics work, but it's always been a question of how much they work.
Yeah.
So I think what this tells us is that we all have very different gut microbes. You and I we only share about 20% of our gut microbes. So having one probiotic might be work very differently in you and I. But a prebiotic fiber is like a broad brush, what we call blunderbuss approach. You'd call it shotgun approach.
But it's a pretty good chance that
these are going to work.
Yeah.
So this will stimulate a lot of new microbes, giving them a food source they hadn't seen before. And so this is why we think it's working. And I think this is a whole new way of thinking about nutrition. We'd love people to eat that every day, but it's hard to get your baobab and your cordyceps and these other things. So, and we'll keep developing it, I think, as the science tells us what's going on. But so far, it's highly successful, and as well as these gut changes, as I said, people get the symptom changes as well. So you get less hunger, so you lose weight, and you're getting the mood changes, the improvements in energy and mood. Probably, as I said, happen even before you get the big shifts in the gut microbes.
I love it. It's a shortcut. At the end of the day, we do live in this food environment that serves 95% of the food. The food environment serves us up as bad. And you really have to be proactive. Most of the time you have to be cooking at home. And in case you're not, you have at least this easy way to get
I want everyone to. Don't get me wrong. I'd love everyone to be, eating whole plants, getting their 30 a week, the natural way. But if they can do that, and they can do this as well, or this is like the insurance policy when it's difficult, or they've got kids who are difficult, and they can just add it to their spaghetti, or their smoothie
or granola. You wouldn't even notice it.
Exactly, they wouldn't notice. You're just silently improving the health of people.
Is sourdough bread a probiotic, a fermented product?
If it's real, most of the ones you get in the stores are fake sourdough. What they do is they make it chemically, and they just sprinkle a bit of sourdough flour in there.
So it tastes sour.
Or they might have a slight smell on it that they spray in it, and it's fake. And they charge an extra $1 for it, and it's useless. Sourdough itself, I think, is slightly overrated as a health food because it all depends on the flour. If you're still using refined white flour, it's still not going to be good for you. But if you get the good ones that are made properly and they have high fiber content, then it is going to be slightly better for you. And it will contain some dead microbes. So you are getting some postbiotics. Yeah, so some of them are good, but you really got to go to the store that you trust.
So my breakfast every day, I learned the recipe for a Sardinian minestrone from the longest lived family in the history of the world. 9 siblings, made it 843 years collectively. And they had the same minestrone every day. And it has 3 beans. It has celery, carrots, onions, garlic. It has tomato in there, a little bit of barley sometimes. It has rosemary in there, potatoes, and finished off with an extra virgin olive oil. How's that for a gut-friendly?
That sounds perfect.
Thank you.
Yes. Is that
I heard it from the master himself.
So that sounds absolutely perfect. So I think, we need to move away from, having our dessert for breakfast and look at other cultures
which is cereal.
and countries. Which is...
Or eggs and bacon, which is in America. It's a classic, it's either cereal and milk or eggs and bacon, and it's probably the worst way to start your day. Yeah, the other thing, smoothies. What's your opinion of smoothies? Taking a bunch of fruit and then some nut milk and a protein powder and blending it up?
I have mixed feelings about smoothies because it sort of all depends. I imagine most people's smoothies just have way too much sugar in them. And adding lots of chemical powders to them just seems kind of wrong, really. I'm fairly ambivalent about protein powders and creatine if it's not impeding with the rest of your diet. Key about smoothies is if you are going to add plants to it, it's the whole plant, and you're not squeezing out and missing
not
the important bits. You're not juicing.
Yeah.
So if it's the whole plant, generally, and you do finish it and you don't sort of just have the liquid at the top and leave the sludge, it's probably doing you some good if you haven't got too many sweet fruits. But if it's full of mangoes and it's full of bananas and really sweet fruits, you're going to be getting much too much sugar in a way that nature never really intended you to eat fruit.
Yeah.
So it's the same sort of thing, why is orange juice not healthy? Well, because you wouldn't normally be having the equivalent of 8 oranges in one glass. That's the worry there. But if it's more vegetables than fruits, I'm okay with it. And you can make it healthy. You can add nuts and seeds. You can add daily 30 to it. But I personally don't do it myself.
How about meat? Do you eat meat?
I eat meat about once or twice a month. I went about 5 years without eating any meat. And I did get B12 deficient and started having injections. And I thought, this is a bit silly. And so I started going back to meat. I can't eat much quantities of meat, but I eat small amounts. My wife's a French-Belgian, so she's a real carnivore. So in restaurants, she's tucking into some T-bone, so she often gives me a small bite or something.
If you were in just sort of general guidelines, or let's say it's your 20-year-old son or daughter said, Dad, how much meat should I eat?
Pick the very best meat and probably have it once a week. We've done some research on this. So we had a paper came out a few months ago comparing vegans, vegetarians, and omnivores. I don't know if I've told you about this, but
no.
So we had about 25,000 people who had all filled in these detailed dietary questionnaires with Zoe, all had their gut tests, and we looked to say, well, who's got the healthiest gut? You'll be pleased to know the vegans won on average. They beat the vegetarians, and they beat the omnivores. And we adjusted for things like obesity and social class, education, other diseases, and we even adjusted for the diet quality. But the devil's in the details. So the top 1% of the healthiest gut people had an overabundance of the omnivores. Okay, so they had the most diverse and the best ratio of good to bad bugs. And it turns out when you looked at them in detail, they were the ones who were also eating the most plants.
Oh, interesting.
So what this tells me is that for gut health, it's not so much this categorical religion about saying, I'm a vegan, I'm a vegetarian, I'm a lacto-free, whatever, I'm a carnivore. You can have any of those as long as you can get enough plants on your plate. But none of the meat eaters were big meat eaters. They were small or occasional meat eaters who managed every day to get lots of plants on their plate and get to the 30 plus plants.
So the name of the game is diversity and quantity of plants.
Yeah, and not be stuck with labels,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that's really important because people get fixated, and you can be a very unhealthy vegan and a very healthy carnivore.
Yeah.
But we need to just realize what are the key essentials, and it sort of makes sense because if you are eating everything, you're giving your microbes the best possible choice.
Mm-hmm.
They can decide what they want to eat, right? Here's the buffet, Whereas if you go into these restrictive diets, as many people do in America, they're just not giving themselves that option. So, there aren't that many people on carnivore diets in the UK, but if we had, I'm sure they would have had the worst gut health.
And how about fish?
Slightly pro, but I like the Mediterranean fish that are high in the omegas and low in mercuries. And low in microplastics. So
sardines and
I love sardines. I love anchovies. So I'll put them in everything. And so, I spend a lot of time in Spain, and these guys are having these foods every day.
And Spain, by the way, they live about 5 years longer than Americans do. So
right.
Maybe it's because of what they eat. And speaking of Spain, where do you come down on wine? Pro wine, or a lot of health information out there telling us, sending up big red flags about drinking alcohol.
Yeah, everyone is telling us that there's no safe limit of alcohol. It's bad for everybody. And that's statistically correct. But I think if you're drinking 1 unit of alcohol a day, there's no evidence that is going to make any real difference to your life. You'd have to have about 1,000 people to show one event through drinking 1 unit a day. So very small amounts have been exaggerated because they don't show compared to what. I think you've got 3 times more risk of dying just by driving your car for 1 hour than you have of drinking 1 glass of wine.
Oh, wow.
So it's all relative. And people talk about risk, but they never put them in proportion. But luckily, as an epidemiologist, that's what we're quite good at. Now, having said that, if you are going to drink a unit a day, which one should you drink?
By the way, I think a unit is measured in either a 12-ounce beer or an ounce of spirits, which, by the way, is often mixed with, orange juice or Coke or margarita mix or whatever.
It's like a shot. It's a shot. It's a small beer glass, or it's a small, medium glass of wine.
Yeah.
And that's a general unit. And yeah, we all lie about how many units we consume if you're an alcohol drinker. But if you are going to drink one, what I would say is if you pick red wine, that will give you some health benefit to counteract any problem, because studies convincingly show that drinking 1 to 2 glasses of red wine gives you a cardiac protection of about 20% compared to people who don't drink. Now, doesn't mean you're protected from other things. Cancer risk might be slightly increased. So it's a nuanced one. But we did a study of several thousand people looking at what alcohols people drank and their gut health. And again, I think the reason that it's actually good for your heart is that it's good for your gut microbes. And the reason is red wine is obviously fermented, but the grape skin is part of the drink. And that has these defense chemicals, these polyphenols. White wine is less so you've got to drink a lot more to get the same polyphenols, so it sort of negates itself. And the only other similar drink we found that might be potentially healthy would be what we call alcoholic cider.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The fermented apple juice that's very common in Europe, because again, you've got bits of apple that you're eating. So little tip for you. But the red wine fits into the Mediterranean theory of why these things might be giving a health benefit.
Yeah, I've always had kind of a problem with blanket malignment of wine, because red wine's been part of the Mediterranean diet for thousands of years. And I don't know if we fully understand how it interacts with the other foods in a Mediterranean diet, how it interacts with the plants and the whole grains, and that's inside the body, and then how it fuels social interaction. So I'm one of the kind of lone voices out there and saying, not so fast with bad-mouthing wine.
I am too. I get attacked all the time when I say, red wine is actually fine. And I absolutely agree. I think it's part of the prohibition temperance movement. There's so many worse things than drinking a glass of wine a day, right?
Yeah.
In our society and in our food system. Why aren't they being picked on? And I think it's this sort of religious temperance movement that has a strange view of this stuff. That, as you said, binds societies together, is incredibly important socially. Yeah. But clearly, some people do get addicted to it, and it's extremely bad for them in that case.
People get addicted to Coke, so.
They do, and they get addicted to junk food, and that's actually much more of a problem than getting addicted to a glass of red wine. So moderation in moderation.
We have the new book, Ferment, which...
anyone keen to understand fermented foods?
Yes.
That's the Bible.
So somehow he manages to be a top 1% producer in cited academic articles and somehow be a key part of this fantastic company. And I'm not a big fan of most health and wellness companies, but I'm a big fan of Zoe, and I'm a big fan of yours. You do such a great job of explaining the science, but also giving us practical ways to put it to work. And you're on the cutting edge, and I just think you are not only a national treasure for Britain, but a treasure for the United States. And I hope more Zoe and more Tim Spector make it to the U.S.
Oh, that's great. You're making me cry, Dan. It's too much.
I'm just a reporter.
I love you too.
I already got you on my podcast, so I don't even have to butter you up anymore. Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure, Dan.